The Great Hong Kong Sex Novel by George Adams. Continued. Chapter 2. Candy Yeung and the Empire of Legs. Sam was quite delighted to move into our flat above the mall in Admiralty. It had everything a woman could want in the way of convenience, and Sam liked convenience. She loved the maids, the shopping that arrived miraculously by order, and which was stowed by yet another miracle, more or less exactly where it should be stowed. After a month, she decided to join a health club because she just wasn't getting enough exercise. When she saw this wasn't going to solve the boredom problem, she took a ridiculously underpaid job as a property negotiator. It got her out of the house, she said. I'd known Sam for 7 years. She's a stunning blonde girl, about 5'11", very slim and with an angelic face. In Britain, she was quite a prize. In Hong Kong, she slowly took on the status of an admirable separate species. My love for her became in the end almost purely abstract. Yet even when the Oriental women took over completely, I always respected the quality of her mind. There was nothing abstract about that. With the Chinese girls, I admired their bodies more than their minds. To be perfectly honest, their minds seldom entered into things. From quite early on, you see, I was the perfect chauvinist. Now, there are lots of jokes about men who can only remember a woman's body rather than her mind and character. I'm as guilty of that type of chauvinism as the next man. This part of my confession is offered in mitigation. It is the story of Candy Yeung. I met Candy in the lift up to the office one day and took a liking to her legs. Without the high heels, you would have had to say that they were short and on the fattish side, but that wouldn't give you the whole picture. We men are so brainwashed by the media that we think only those long, slim Californian legs will do. This is to ignore the diversity of the human species and the differing styles of legs actually available for appreciation. Unfortunately, East Asian women are squeezing themselves into suffocating lycra and having their fat sucked out by horrendous and painful machines. This is a pity, as East Asian legs have qualities all their own. Something really nice about Candy's legs was the way they curved unexpectedly above the knee and then lower down just below the calf. It was easy to imagine the gorgeous proportions of the upper thigh region even by the cursory examination which a shared lift journey of 14 floors decently allows time for. The extra 4 floors to where I worked formed a time of acute absence and eager reflection. I quickly took a liking to such journeys, and after I found out that Candy arrived in the office between 8:58 and 9:03 every morning, I acquired the habit of arriving early too. Of course, she noticed. Candy noticed everything with her sharp eyes, the most archetypally Chinese you can imagine. This was another reason why I felt hopelessly in love, I suppose. The epicanthic fold and the pupil lost in the iris. That is where the mystery really resides. It began with a smile, with a look from her so ingenuously gorgeous that it robbed me of any claim I might have made on my memory banks of manoeuvres. I simply had to smile back. Now, of course, there are all sorts of smiles. There is the smile of the older man seeing something sweet. Candy was 10 or 15 years younger than me, so that sort of smile would have been decorous. There's also the smile of the superior, an indulgent flash of the dentures, mostly to prove that you're really a nice sort of guy underneath all the harassment and exploitation. Then there's the business smile, a kind of Dale Carnegie homicidal grimace, the sort lawyers like me do so well. Some members of my profession even grimace to their wives and best friends, if they have any. I think I smiled a sub-lecture smile tinged with little boy at the fairground. It seemed to work because Candy kept smiling after that, and the dresses seemed to get shorter and tighter. Now, Elevator seduction has never been my forte because I am, underneath it all, a very shy person. The idea of slipping a girl my business card or anything else between floor 5 and floor 10 somehow makes me blush down to my Gucci's. That sort of behaviour might be all right in the USA, perhaps with the Californian girl who has the long, slim legs, but I don't think it would do for meeting local girls in Hong Kong. Even if they were panting for you, I don't think they would want to get introduced in that way. It makes them look too cheap. Luckily, Candy helped me along. One morning she arrived carrying a pile of computer manuals tied up with flimsy nylon cord. Cavalier by nature, I instantly offered my assistance. "Thank you. You're so kind," she breathed in a voice set somewhere down low, but with a lot of high treble frills. I felt something staring in the Y-fronts even then. "You work in the same building. I've seen you many times. I'm Candy Yeung." There were only a few people in the lift at the time, and frankly I didn't care whether they listened or not. "I'm Nigel Trelford. Who do you work for?" "Taylor and Bradford." I'm only a secretary." "I think you're a very nice secretary." "You are very kind." And that was my portion of intimacy. Lifts in Hong Kong ought to be slower. I thought it would have been going too far to help her to the office, so I let her struggle out on the 14th floor. As Candy knelt down to gather the manuals, her knee joints flashed before me. Then I saw beyond. Tapered, voluptuous, unblemished, with just the barest trace of youthful embonpoint, but no hint of flabbiness. Her thighs, what I could see of them, were temptation with a capital T. Before she had quite gathered the manuals, she looked up to me, her feline eyes sparkling, her teeth regular and only slightly discoloured, her cheeks dimpling slightly, her tongue protruding onto her lower lip for a fraction of a second. "Goodbye, Mr. Trelford." That morning was a bit of a professional disaster. Thigh-like shapes kept appearing before my eyes, and Candy's face was on every woman's in the office like a ghostly aura. That morning, vividly and keenly, I knew what love is. Lunchtime presented my only opportunity for further spontaneous rendezvous. Fortunately, there was a stand-up sandwich bar next to the office lobby where it was not unusual to see suits such as myself enjoying a tuna fish sandwich and an Icelandic spring water for lunch. Candy was a rice box person and took it in turns, I observed, to fetch 6 or 7 of them for her colleagues. Some days, especially Fridays, she would emerge from the lift lobby with 4 or 5 of her colleagues to form a giggling group which staggered crab-like along the sidewalk, oblivious of everyone else, like all the other groups of Hong Kong. In my lover's infatuation, I fancied I could see that she wasn't really part of the meandering group of office girls. I saw something distinctly deferent, even distant, in her behaviour towards the other girls. She also seemed to wear less makeup, have classier clothes, a different walk, a quite untypical way of holding her head and arranging her hair. Of course, in the end, she noticed me. She'd stepped out one lunchtime to buy one of those mysterious feminine necessities from the drugstore opposite, and was crossing the road in her gracious but circumspect manner when she saw me sipping a Perrier water in the window of the sandwich bar. She giggled for some reason and came inside. "Mr. Trelford," she said, "do you always have lunch here?" "Yes, quite often. I just have to get out of the office at lunchtime. What about you?" "Oh, I often eat in the office. I have so much to do at present." "But you might find time to have lunch with me sometime." "Oh, yes. I mean, when are you free?" It had been that easy. There were 2 days before the day we had agreed upon. These were the days when the empire of legs descended upon me and seized me like a vice. Standing at the roadside at Central, waiting for the red to change to green, my eyes dismembered the crowd of women waiting opposite. Legs were surprisingly of every shape in Hong Kong. There were long, thin legs, smooth and elegant, or legs verging towards the scrawny. When does elegance stop and scrawniness begin? I suppose it is in the ratio of muscle to flesh, to bone. Some girls' bones shone white through their sensible pantyhose, which sagged a little at the knee. Their delicate blue veins could be discerned at their shin bone or bulging at their ankle. The elegant leg stretched the nylon, smoothed it into shape, suggested grace and rightness rather than deprivation and austerity. Other legs were a little too short, were pressed into the wrong shoes so often, so inelegantly, so charmlessly. The tendon at the heel was not distinct. There was no gathering of flesh above the knee. There were also Japanese legs. I can usually recognize a Japanese girl just by her legs. At first I thought such legs were misshapen, dumpy, truncated even. But at last I saw their harmony, their charm, the contrast they so often presented to the grace and sveltness of Japanese girls' torsos. Many legs were set too low down, were hardly given opportunity to be legs at all. East Asian people are often not generously limbed, yet in Central at lunchtime, in the MTR, watching pairs of legs alighting from taxis and trams, I knew I was in a favourable galaxy of legs, in a fertile plain, so to speak. In summer, the braver girls threw away their torturing pantyhose and exposed their skins to Hong Kong's urban rays of sunshine. Chinese girls are heliophobes, shielding themselves from ultraviolet like sufferers of malignant disease. Leprous white is in, is sexually stimulating, is a prize of some kind of breeding. I often suspected some racial motivation in Asia aimed towards paleness. It had been suggested to me that Japanese women have operations in Harley Street to make their bodies produce less skin pigmentation. In Hong Kong there were preparations in the beauty shops for natural paling and tubes of heavy makeup which so many of the tie-ties and pop stars smeared on themselves in thick, unconvincing layers. Thankfully, this Elizabethanism did not usually extend to legs. In legs, I saw the true Hong Kong woman. I tried to choose somewhere unassuming for lunch, but in the end I decided to impress Candy slightly, not by wealth, because that would have been vulgar. It would have said something about my intentions, and she could easily have been frightened away. Instead, I chose an elegant tea room in Pedder Street, which attracted a wide range of interesting clientele. The food was very colonial English and quite different from what Candy ate in her lunch boxes or in her local restaurants. I would have had an opportunity to be a little snobbish there, for I felt already that Candy had some pretensions to culture. In fact, I was quite wrong. Candy was not pretentious at all. Candy was wearing, I could see, an outfit which was calculated to be attractive without compromising her appearance of correctness in the office. The top half was some blouse and jacket, whilst below, invisible when she sat at her desk, I presumed, was a tight matching skirt adjusted to the outer limits of acceptability. "What a delightful place to meet," Candy said. I was pleased she knew words like delightful. It meant I would probably not have to simplify my English so much. "Yes, it does have a certain atmosphere." Candy was easy to talk to because she listened so well, soaking up every word I said and making something out of it. Whatever angle I used to approach her, though, there was always a distinct echo, but very little else. She was shrouded in mystery. Candy lived with her mother in Western District. Her father died some years ago, and her mother was also something of an invalid. She liked her job sometimes, and I hated it other times, just like me. She had no particular boyfriend and no particular plans. She stayed in some nights and went out others. She wanted to travel, but she liked Hong Kong, and so on. I, on the other hand, supplied a great deal of information about myself, which Candy drank in, her bright eyes flickering every now and then as she memorized a detail. "Might you be free for dinner later this week?" I asked at last. "Call me in the office," she replied. Candy was a busy girl with her English course, her Mandarin lessons, her squash and her dancing classes. I wondered when she found time for love. Lunch finished, Candy's legs uncrossed themselves slowly, and she rose to descend the wooden staircase. Although we had talked a great deal, I knew as little about her as when we first met. When she shook my hand in the street below, her full smile again made me warm inside, despite my not knowing what it exactly indicated. Next morning I called her to arrange dinner. I was amazed at Candy's passivity, her amenability at best, which always put the ball in my court. I decided where to meet, what we could eat, what we should wear, where we might go afterwards. We met for dinner some days later in one of the Kowloon harbour front hotels. It was a beautiful evening, and the lights of Hong Kong across the water were a brilliant sight. Candy was no longer the functional office lady I knew. She was transformed in a formal silk dress made up like a dream, and her hair framing a radiant face like two perfect shining waterfalls. I talked of my past, my dreams, my likes, my hates, my future. Candy smiled, laughed when it was appropriate, looked serious when I frowned. "What are your dreams?" I asked, suddenly aware that I might be boring her. "My dreams? I have no time for dreams." I decided to pursue the question. "I used to dream a lot when I was younger," she said at last with a smile. "What about?" "Many things, such as, oh, I liked animals a lot. Do you like animals?" "Some. Dogs especially." The theme of the conversation reverted to me again, as it did so often through the evening. I was filled with frustration. I had not told her the whole truth, but I had told her a lot about myself. I had no idea what she wanted from me, or whether she wanted anything at all. Fortunately, I soon lost interest in conversation. We were side by side on the Kowloon Harbour walkway in front of the hotels. That particular spot was really a very busy lovers' lane, and we were lucky to find a pitch. Some couples stood against the railing, engaged in petting so intimate as to be embarrassing. I wondered why they didn't go home to relieve their tension. I said as much to Candy. She turned towards me. My hand brushed against her leg. She looked up to me, into my eyes. I kissed her, slightly, against her will at first, but she quickly responded. We kissed for some minutes. Each time she withdrew from me nervously with a slight laugh, as if she'd been surprised by my impetuosity. She leant against me, and my hand gripped her thigh. It was a wonderful thigh. Even through the stocking it gave sensuously in the most remarkable places. Candy sat down on a bench, hoisting up her dress a little as she did so. In the lights of the harbour and the hotel windows behind us, her knees shone luminously, round and alluring like giant pearls in her white stockings. I put a hand on one of them. Candy did not resist. My hand proceeded up her thigh. She protested. A point had been made, and I did not pursue the matter. "I think I really must go," she said, pulling out a small lipstick case and hairbrush from her handbag as she spoke. "You are a very dangerous man." I scandalized all Hong Kong on my way with Candy to the Star Ferry. The couples we passed looked dismayed, even more resentful than when I was out with Dorothy. Passing two policemen, I felt I was about to be arrested. "You're obviously too pretty to be allowed," I said to Candy as I kissed her goodbye. She smiled briefly and ran off. She did not wave or look round as she went through the turnstile. I was not surprised. The Chinese are not great leave-takers. All next morning I thought I'd blown it with Candy, but when I called her just before lunch, she was as friendly as ever. Walking together through the lunchtime crowds, I was conscious that we had reached a turning point, that point in a relationship when people become just friends or take their clothes off. I don't like platonic relationships with women, so I was hoping to get some sign from Candy that intimacy was just around the corner. It didn't come that lunchtime. Candy was as poised and as distant as ever. I invited her to a concert. The local orchestra was doing bits of Wagner, including the beginning and end of Parsifal. I don't think there's anything more moving or mysterious in music than just those bits, the passionate yearning of the overture and the sublimely ethereal ending. We were squashed in some good seats downstairs, and as the leg room in the cultural centre is limited for big men, you have to slant your legs to the left or right. This brought me into contact with Candy's knees again, which were, this time, draped in sheerest black. As the lights dimmed, my hands gently felt them both. Something really got into the orchestra that evening, and they gave a fine performance of the Parsifal finale. The music was brilliant and convincing, even without the choir. I looked at Candy's face to see what was registering under such an onslaught of emotional sound. There was no shock, no bliss, no tears. "What do you think of the Wagner?" I asked her afterwards as we sipped a drink in the peninsula. "It was very nice, like in a film." The last time I saw Candy was several weeks later. I was despairing about getting anywhere. I suppose she was a virgin and inexperienced with men. It was going to be a long haul, and I felt very sad. Luckily, something happened to brighten my mood. A lawyer friend lent me his car for the weekend because he was afraid it might be stolen whilst he was away in Bangkok. I hadn't driven for years, so I was a little apprehensive. Then I thought of Candy and how nice it would be to drive up to the new territories and indulge in a little groping, perhaps even a little more. "Would you like to drive out to Sai Kung?" I asked her over mega MSG noodles and grey beef in a bad Japanese restaurant that Friday lunchtime. "If you promise to be a good boy." It was a beautiful day, none too humid when the sun was shining. All through the drive past the dreary suburbs of East Kowloon, my hands were growing more daring, and this time Candy did not object. Once, when we stopped at a junction, her dress was hoisted so high we were noticed by a man and his wife crossing the road in front of us. Candy pulled down her dress demurely. Just like Kowloon Park on Saturday evening, it was hard finding a vacant plot that afternoon because all the couples of Hong Kong were out in their tin love caravans. Some of the cars had tinted glass, which made spotting the antics a little difficult. Many couples were smoking post-coitally at the windows, or pouting and snarling, following some kind of pre-coital tiff. The drive-in plot I eventually found was at the end of a long, winding lay-by, and we had passed 3 or 4 cars to get there. I stopped, put on the handbrake, and looked around just to make certain we were alone. "Bad man," Candy said, with a smile. "I suppose it's really quite easy for small Asian people to make love in cars, but you can count me out. I was just trying to secure my trousers and underpants around my ankles whilst lowering the driver's seat when my arse caught the horn for a moment. Candy, whose knickers had been successfully removed after some token protest, sniggered wildly. I don't know whether it was the sound of the horn or the sight of me trying to roll a condom onto a half-mast penis, which caused the greatest hilarity. At any rate, when she had stopped laughing and an air of seriousness necessary to sex had returned, I was surprised to find not only that Candy wasn't a virgin, but that sex with a condom can be fun. But all the fun couldn't quite cancel out the technical inhibitions of our situation. At one point I had to press the window open to give Candy's leg more room. It jutted out of the window only an inch or two, but I think it was my abiding impression of the afternoon, white, shapely, with the smallest of feet, waggling loosely in rhythm with the pounding movements lower down. When I had disentangled my trousers from the clutch and accelerator and thrown away my condom into the undergrowth already strewn with lovers' debris, an act necessitating my naked exposure to the elements as I opened the driver's door to pull up my pants, I looked over to Candy. She had readjusted herself with remarkable speed and was applying lipstick, using the rear-view mirror as her guide. You've done this sort of thing before, I said. She pouted at me for a moment. Bad man. In the lowering of spirits brought on by such self-indulgence, I was in the mood for some more intellectual probing of the sphinx called Candy, which stopped at one of the prandial pit stops of Sai Kung, a seafood restaurant called El Bonco's or something similar. It was full of devotees of bare-ass boxing, fortifying themselves on squid and prawns, along with the odd mournful expatriate couple, wondering why everyone was so happy. I've known you for so long, yet I don't feel I know you at all, I began. Candy was poking at some prawns in egg white and was a little slow to respond. What do you want to know? I don't know what I want to know. If I knew what I wanted to know, I'd already be halfway into knowing it. Knowing people is not like knowing, knowledge. It's about the way someone is. Do you know what I mean? No, I don't know. I tried a different tack. How did you feel when we were making love? Candy thought for a moment and put down her chopsticks deliberately. It was very nice. Nice? I exclaimed incredulously. Cups of tea are nice. You want a cup of tea? No, I don't want a cup of tea. I want to know what you keep hidden inside. What are your thoughts, your passions, your dreams, your reason for living? I really was laying it on a bit thick, as you can see. Candy thought for some moments as a new dish of boiled crab arrived. Then she looked at me for the first time with a look of real sadness. I know nothing. We were dramatically quiet during our trip back to town. Something had happened. When I look back on it all, I can't quite escape the feeling that I had pushed Candy into something, set her walking where she didn't want to go. I wasn't ultimately responsible for what happened to her. I don't think you could say that. That would be going too far. If I hadn't put these things to her, somebody else would have. There's no doubt about that. I dropped Candy off at a housing estate in Weston and drove back home. Sam was waiting for me with a set of complaints about the maid. I thought all the convenience was getting too much for her. What's the problem exactly? I asked, twiddling with the TV remote control. All the satellite stations came in slightly mistuned and thus slightly out of focus. I suppose it made me appreciate the BBC more when I had to strain a little to see it. Well, Sam began, after the maid had been dispatched to the small downstairs to bring in some urgently needed dry as pecan and passion fruit ice cream, to the mall downstairs. She's so bloody annoying with her yes ma'am and this and sir said that. I don't think she's got a brain at all. Well, She probably has, she just hasn't been called on to use it in her previous employment. Can't you live out? It would make me feel much more comfortable. Well, we'll have to get her a flat, if you insist. I was happy to have solved that little problem. Sam was infinitely more relaxed afterwards. She didn't seem to mind the fact that I was clapped out sexually that evening. My input on the financial or domestic front was always appreciated that way, and a pattern quickly established itself. When I thought I was coming it a little too much with the outside love interest, I simply bought her something. Amazingly, it worked most times. Of course, I'd heard all about things like that, appeasing the wife, guilt presents, and so on, but it really is amazing how typical some people, especially women, actually are. I didn't call Aunt Candy again. It was just too much hard work trying to get to first base with her on an intellectual or spiritual level, I mean. Surprisingly, you may think that sort of thing means a lot to me after, that is, certain physical needs have been met. I kept thinking about what somebody had once told me about the hollow people of the world, the people who have nothing inside, however hard you try to dig, people without any inner life. There are more of those people around than anyone else likes to admit. I never bumped into Candy in the lift anymore, which I thought a little odd. I did remember to send her a birthday card, though. I finally called her one afternoon, but no one picked up the phone. It must have been 6 months later when the police came to see me. There was a young, red-haired British inspector and a tall, thin local man. Visits from the police don't cause me a lot of surprise or dismay, so I wasn't particularly alarmed when they walked into the office one morning, looking as inconspicuous as Eddie Murphy at an apartheid South African cabinet meeting. Candy had disappeared. They had found my business card amongst the things in her desk and wanted to know if I could help locate her. I haven't seen her for months, Inspector, I said. How long has she been missing? Quite a long time, sir. She resigned her job about 6 months ago and never took another as far as we can see. Lived off her savings for a while and then just vanished. Her mother's very distressed. The girl just went to the 7-Eleven one night and never came back. How odd, I said as nonchalantly as I could, because I didn't want any trouble. Didn't have any boyfriends or anyone? Not that we know of, sir. And what was your relationship with Miss Yeung, if you don't mind us asking? Oh, met her in the lift. I helped her shift a few things one morning, had lunch together. That was it. The tall local man noted the details down slowly and neatly on a piece of official-looking lined paper. And you know nothing of her present whereabouts? Nothing at all. Is there something wrong? You don't think someone's killed her? No, said the inspector. There's no indication of anything of that sort. You're probably just one of these people that disappear. There are hundreds on the file. Some are found washed up on outlying islands occasionally, but most remain a mystery forever. That's Hong Kong. I looked suitably glum and puzzled. That was also how I really felt. Now, one last question, sir. Is there anything you could tell us which might help us locate Miss Yeung? Something she might have said, something you noticed about her? Anything at all which stuck out, as it were? Difficult, I said, staring towards the harbour with something like a whimsical look on my face. There isn't much at all, I could tell you. She didn't give a lot away, you know. She was that sort of person, and inscrutable, you could say. But that wasn't it. There was something else, something more disturbing in a way. In the end, there was only one thing I could say, however strange it sounded to the two policemen. "There is something, actually," I began. "I don't know quite how to tell you." "Try me, sir," the inspector said patiently, leaning forward slightly and drawing a tiny notebook and pencil from his shirt pocket. "Well," I said, looking straight into the inspector's keen grey eyes for long, pregnant seconds, "she did have the most extraordinary pair of legs."